Stranded. I saw her standing on the corner of the street. She cast a wonderful silhouette in the low afternoon sun of a winter's day. The clouds had cleared, leaving a bright and cold winter day. As I approached her, I could tell by her outfit that she had not expected to be out for long. She was wearing cropped jeans and a flimsy jacket. I chuckled to myself, thinking she should have been wearing tights over that beautiful pale skin. The first thing that struck me about her was the full Rubenesque hips. The hips tapered down via strong, meaty-looking thighs to muscular calves which ended in a pair of fashionable, rather than practical, high-heeled boots. I could tell she was used to wearing heels. She didn't totter or look unsteady in them as she stomped back and forth on the slightly frosty pavement. She held a mobile phone pressed to her ear and was shouting into it. Little plumes of hot breath escaped from her mouth into the crisp, cold air. From what I could hear from the single side of the conversation I could gather was that she was getting frustrated. "How long?" she squealed in a shrill voice, loud enough that passers-by on the other side of the street turned to look at her. I just watched her for now. "What the hell do you expect me to do till then? It's seriously freezing. I need to get to my folks' house by tomorrow afternoon. I have a funeral to get to. Damn it!" I laughed at the irony of her words. How little she knew. She was distracted by her argument with her phone and hadn't noticed me watching her. I just leaned on the whitewashed wall of the butcher's and waited for my moment. The golden sun was directly behind her, romanticizing her silhouette, but allowing me to see her figure beautifully. She was toned, but not too muscly that it made her unattractive. Rather, it gave her a beautiful shape, and she still retained a sizable chest. The sun shone through the strands of golden hair which had escaped from the tight ponytail on top of her head. I'd already decided she was the one. But I was biding my time. I slowed my breath again and waited. Here was too public. I nodded at Mrs. Laszlo's as she passed me while leaving the butcher's with her weekly shop. I would have to take her somewhere more private. The coast was clear. I was soon close enough to see how pretty she was. She had a radiant smile, framed by full red lips, which lifted her cheeks and made her blue eyes flash in the morning sun. "I couldn't help but overhear, Mum. Having some trouble with your car, I guess." I didn't introduce myself. I offered a little smile of understanding. She seemed relieved to see a friendly face as her anger faded a little. "Oh, yeah, bloody mechanics," she blushed, surprised that she'd been caught shouting. I was surprised by how quickly her tone changed. She had a charming accent that was out of town, but I couldn't place it, which elongated the vowels in her words. "Perhaps I could help. At least get you a warm drink while you wait?" I tried my most non-offensive, approachable voice and offered the woman a smile. She couldn't have been more than 25. She accepted my offer of a ride and a cup of coffee without hesitation, offering me a gleeful smile and nod. As we approached my car, I could feel my heart rate increase until it was hammering away in my ears. She was facing away from me, lowering her head to get in. She didn't see the needle until it was too late. I held her down with all my force as she tried to kick and wailed, forcefully pushing the syringe into her neck. The anaesthetic worked quickly, and she fell heavily into the passenger seat as her screams trailed off. It was only a few minutes until I was able to heave her off her seat and carry her down into the basement of my property. They were always heavier than they looked when they were unconscious, and I was glad to be able to put her down on the freshly washed tile floor of my workroom. I watched her shallow breaths for just a moment and wondered what she was dreaming about. I wanted to savour the time it took to undress her. I let my rough hands run slowly over her smooth flesh, resting on her chest as I enjoyed the contrast between the sensations. I used sharp scissors to cut her clothes from her body so I could stand back and admired my catch in all her beauty. I let my eyes linger on her heavy chest as it moved slowly up and down. I waited for a few seconds before I went any further. No need to rush. I bound her ankles with cable ties, crossing the delicate bones so one sat neatly on top of the other before I fastened the tie tight. Rolling her onto her stomach, I was able to tie her wrists behind her back in the same way. The black plastic bit into her skin. She was helpless now. She twitched, not stirring from her chemically induced slumber. Perhaps she was dreaming of something wonderful. I wanted to take my time. My lips were dry with excitement, so I decided to make myself a coffee. I took this chance to empty the contents of her purse onto my desktop, rifling through it until I found her driving license. I sat back and read her details as I sipped the hot drink and waited for her to stir. She hollered, anguished, scared. I wasn't scared. No one would come to her aid. They always made so much pointless noise. I couldn't see her from this corner as I sat drinking. I knew how much she would be squirming as she came to terms with where she was and what was happening. I smiled again and took the last mouthful of my coffee. I took a deep breath, decided, and went back to my prize. They always started with the begging. I sighed and let her pour her heart out as I pulled the chain down behind her back. The metal was cold, unforgiving as it wrapped tightly around her ankles, pressing indentations into her smooth flesh as she tried to wriggle away from me. "Where are you trying to go?" I asked, unflustered by her screams. Hoisting her up by her ankles was made easier by the pulleys I put in months ago. Soon, she was swaying freely as her face reddened with the blood rushing to her skull. Her breasts were natural, gravity pulling them down towards the bottom of her face as I used my hands to steady her. I always expected them to cry when they saw the blade I produced. Like the rest, she was bawling and pleading for her life. She was trembling as I knelt there beside her head and held the knife before her pretty blue eyes. I wondered if she could see her reflection through the tears. I'd never know. "Why?" They always wanted to know why. I didn't answer her. I tried to make the cut across the throat deep, and the kill quick. The dark crimson of her blood stained my knife and her beautiful pale skin as I sawed the head free. It was always tougher than I remembered, and messier than I liked. I tried to avoid the pool of blood embassing by my feet as I finally lifted her head free and left the meat to drain. I'd hose the floor and body down in due course. For now, I found the empty jar at the end of the shelf and placed the head inside. I adjusted the face, made sure I could preserve her beauty, and poured over the formaldehyde, sealing her inside before I put her next to her companions on my shelf. The final touch. Her driving license. I placed a little plastic card in front of her in my gallery of trophies so I could always remember her name. Victoria was unlucky. That was why. Her car broke down in the wrong place at the wrong time. I sat back and relaxed, my heart rate steadying as I looked along the shelf. I'd have to do some DIY soon. I would need more room. My phone danced as it vibrated and began the poor rendition of Beethoven. It was work calling. "Sheriff James, how can I help?" I answered. I chuckled at the story the man at the other end of the phone was telling me. "Sure. Tell Frank I'll have Mrs. Laszlo's meat ready in time." I looked over at the hanging meat as it drained in the corner of the room and smiled. All that work had made me hungry.